Welcome all to this episode 5 of Still Uncaptured. I still remain Undumiso Ngcobo Iqadi, who's just come from Emaqadini, the Valley of a Thousand Hills. And of course, I'm joined by.
My name is Khomotso Matsunyane. We're so happy to have you on the show. And thank you so much for the fantastic launch of our first episode, which you supported in ridiculously high numbers. We're happy. Spotify is happy. Mama's happy. Dad is happy.
We're recording episode 5 after we've just, released the first episode. The reaction has been phenomenal. Just coming through here, we're recording at Rosebank Mall. I wasn't quite mobbed, like Michael Jackson or anything. But I had to stop a couple of times
Yeah?
to take selfies.
Took some selfies?
I took
No, that's good. No, but the
selfies.
love is really phenomenal. And
It really has been.
and we
yeah.
appreciate it. Most
We really,
importantly.
really love it. This show from day one, because this is an extension of Good Morning Gauteng, Uncaptured, and of course now Still Uncaptured. And we've always, listener engagement has always been absolutely amazing for our conversations. And I have to give a shout out to my friend, Usandile Mlambo. Who I think he encapsulated the feelings of a lot of people because he said that first episode is like, I can put this thing in the car and drive, and I just feel like I am eavesdropping on a conversation between two friends, which is exactly what we want. This is what we
mission
want.
accomplished.
Mission accomplished.
Completely.
Well done.
Anyway,
Well
oh, my back. Old age and
Yes.
segue nicely
Yeah.
into our first conversation of today.
Yeah.
We are 53. I'll be turning 53 soon. Which means we have parents in their 80s.
Yes.
Yeah, and which means I don't know if you're aware, but when you get into your 80s, by the time you get into your 80s, you need a lot more help. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
So anybody who's got elderly parents will know this. Like your parents need help, and you have to pitch in. You just said you came from KZN,
Yeah.
and what is that experience like of helping to take care of your mom?
And that face and that, might seem like I'm just, I don't know, maybe despondent. No, I'm not. Because I think what's happening as well, it's such a weird thing, is that my mother and I now are discovering each other in ways that we never discovered each other before. Because the role that I'm now playing in her life is so completely different to the role that I have played all my life. She really now needs me. I need to be there for her, but that means that it's so important that I like her. But that's not so easy to navigate with someone who because she's got agency, right? She's 80. She might be 80, but she's still got her mind around her, about her. And sometimes you come in and you're trying to be helpful, and yeah, what's the Afrikaans word? Then there's like bottings now and then, like you kind of collide now
Well,
and then. Yeah,
you
yeah,
mentioned agency, which is a big word.
Yeah.
First of all, our roles have reversed,
Yes.
right? This is the people who raised us.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we are in a way raising them.
Of course we are.
Yeah. So the roles, like you take on more responsibility of being the
Mm.
caretaker, whereas they used to be the caretaker before.
Yeah.
I don't imagine emotionally and psychologically that that's a good place for them to be. It cannot
It
be
cannot
fun
be good. It's not.
now having to hear from your snotty-nosed children what to do, how to run your life, and just generally needing a lot of help. And I look at myself in my 50s and I'm like, I don't feel 50. I don't know what 50 is supposed to feel like.
Yeah.
But I'm saying when I was younger, I never imagined.
Yeah.
Did you in your 20s ever think, oh, when I'm 50, I never thought that day would come. Everybody else will be 50 but me. So can you imagine that when we're 80,
Yeah.
we're probably going to feel the same way? Would you
Of
like,
course we will.
I don't feel like I'm in my 80s. So I feel sorry for our parents because it can't be nice.
No, it's
Because
not.
you lose power.
Yes. You know, I mean, I'm recording this and I know that she will not mind. Mama, asking but I have to say this. But we had a tiff yesterday. So I flew in last night from Durban, and that's the next conversation really we need to be having about living arrangements when you have got an 8-year-old parent, right? So we had a fight about something, and it was something pretty. It was very serious, but the way I was speaking to her, I think also I spoke to her in a way that I had never spoken to her before. And so yesterday was another change. And it wasn't disrespectful necessarily, but I spoke to her the way that I would speak to, say, my wife, Tebucho, where it's like, if I'm unhappy with you, and if I'm unhappy with you, Khumutso, um, I spoke to her in that way because it got to a point where I'm like, you truly are being right now being completely unfair. You're being abusive. Of course, there's two sides to any
Oh, I'm sure she's
story.
got a whole
She's
other
got a
side.
whole. I mean, if she wanted to, if she came on this show, which I think we're going to have.
Yes,
We're going to
hopefully we're
have
gonna have
them.
both of them
We're going
on.
to have both our mothers, yeah,
Yes.
so that they can speak for themselves because we speak about them so often. But it's changed. The dynamic has changed because honestly, at some point, I have to say, well, this is my life. This is important to me, and this is very important. So just
Here's the thing.
yeah,
Sometimes
yes,
you talk about my mother complains
yeah,
about how we talk to her as my brother and I, right?
yeah,
Or like she likes to give you know,
yes,
nyonyogo.
yes,
Sungakhulumi nami kanjalo. Do you know what I
yes.
mean? So there's a way in which is there a limit to how you're supposed to communicate with your parents? Because sometimes I just want to say you're full of it. I've never had the audacity to at this
Yeah.
point, but I know that my tongue can be a bit sharp, and she personally feels I disagree, but she personally feels so would like I'm often out of turn in the
Yeah.
way that I speak to her, and her emphasis is that is the old thing yoguthi like which I don't know if it comes from the Bible or if it's part of African
Mm.
culture and tradition. Yoguthi respect your father and mother so that your
Yes, yes.
days.
Hlonipha uyihlononyoko ukuze izinsuku zakho zande
There we go.
ezweni. Yes,
Basically, you
that's
know
a
what I
that's
mean?
a verse. Yeah.
And it hurts me when she says that because I'm
Uh,
just like, oh, how bad was I for her to say that? And if she's saying it, it's her reality, which means to a certain level, it's true. But when it comes to a disagreement, are we
yeah.
then not allowed to say, I disagree with you fundamentally?
Mm.
And sometimes some harsh words can sort of come out. I try not to be that girl.
But
However,
however,
it's inevitable. I live with my mother. Do you
yeah.
understand? So we get under each other's skin all the time.
Mm. Because I also now I spend about 40% of my time in KwaZulu Natal. Anyone who follows me on socials knows that I'm forever in the kingdom of the Zulu because I have to. So it affects my life because any moment that I spend outside of my own home, I'm robbing my wife of my full attention. I'm robbing my children of my full attention,
Mm.
and so on. And sometimes part of the problem that gets to that kind of argy-bargy you're talking about is where you're sitting there going, do you actually understand how much I'm giving up to come and take care of you? Because you and I have talked about this. You and I, we probably took care, we were taken care of by our parents up until sort of what, age 17 or thereabouts. And then we flew out of the nest. So we've been taking care of our parents much longer than they took care of us.
Without a doubt.
So
Oh,
there's
without
also
a
that.
doubt.
And so
Yes.
you try very hard not to get to a point where you resent them for the fact that you are giving up so much to take care of them. And so when there's like back a lot, I don't want to call it back chat, but sometimes that whole attitude. It's like, I'm your mother, and you're like, yeah, you're my mother.
However,
I am responsible for everything that's going on around here.
right, right. And I mean, like
Yeah.
one of the things that I drive my mother, so
Yeah.
sometimes she has to go to retired nurses meetings, which means I have to drive her. Sometimes she wants to go to a friend's funeral and the friends are dying like flies, which brings very uncomfortable conversations with us because it's
Yeah.
like, Mom, is your will ready? Mom, what would you like for us to do at your funeral? So let me turn this around a little bit to say, I watch this, we
Yeah.
fight with my mom, and not all the time. I don't want to make it seem like every day is like horrible. Most of the time, we
Of
also have
course
a good
not.
laugh.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
know, have you thought about your retirement? First of all, are you going to be able to retire? Do you have enough
Yeah.
resources for all of that? Or what would you like to happen? And secondly, would you ever put your mother in a home?
Okay, so here's it's going to sound like I'm being long-winded, but I'm not. So the first thing there is that when it comes to that sort of thing, the one thing I am hoping for, that I am working very hard towards, is that I I genuinely want my children to like me as a human being. I've said this and I'm going to harp on it again. I'm trying very hard to get my children to know me so much so that, and I am significantly more vulnerable to my children. I am significantly more likely to say to my children, "Ngane yami, I said this to you and I feel that it was unfair. I apologize," which certainly our mothers never did with us.
They're not good at apologizing.
No, they're not very good at
Mm-mm.
apologizing, right?
Mm-mm.
Because my mother, I mean, even yesterday when she was apologizing, "Hey, ngiyaxolisa ke." I'm like,
Mm.
hey, that doesn't
Care.
sound
That's
like
care.
ke, yeah, ngiyaxolisa ke. Because, for them it's so difficult. So I want my children to like me a lot. And the reason I'm saying that is the question about homes, taking to a home. I hope that that conversation is not a conversation where people have to sit behind me now, my children. Niyangizwa, Ntobeko, Vumezita, Samafuze, Sihayo, when that time comes. I hope that it's not a conversation that is had about me, but rather with me. To be like, Baba, you do realize now you're struggling, your knees. Hey, Baba, you need full-time care.
Right.
At least I've had that conversation with my mother where she hasn't shown any aversion to it. She just said, the situation, just because she's worried more about my two other brothers who are still in the house,
Right.
how are you going to take care of them? But other than that, she's quite open to the idea that she
Mm.
can be taken to a home. And I want to hope that when I'm 80, and I'm hoping, yeah, that time comes when I'm like 92. Do you know what I mean? Like, I hope not my 80s. I think in my 80s, I'm hoping I'll still be working and I'll still be teaching somewhere. But when that time comes, I think I'd actually love to and just live with people my own age.
Mm.
You?
I would never take my mother to a home.
Why?
She would kill me.
Really? Is it that
She would
bad?
feel that I've abandoned her. Listen, you
Ah,
don't know what the future holds, and I hope she
yeah.
doesn't need to. But
Yes.
rather, we've opted for somebody coming to live with us
Yeah.
who can be her full time helper. And she gets weekends off, like every other weekend off,
And that's
basically.
another thing.
Where there was a time when it just came to that where my mother needs help all the
Yeah.
time, and I'm grateful
Yes.
that we've got enough resources that we're able to afford somebody. Because if we weren't, then all of that would have fallen on me, which would have been incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it would have actually made you very resentful.
Yes.
Because the freedom of movement. I mean, even when I was at home, I mean, I try and steal time. So for instance, I've been in KZN for about sort of 12, 13 days, in one go. And so I needed at some point to be Watuhuza in Stenga. I
Right.
needed to be a Showe. I needed to be in Richards Bay and in Bangeni. But I mean, with my mother, how we are, and I suppose it's because it's mother and son, very often, sometimes it really feels like having a second wife.
Mm.
Because it's siyajola noma gwala manje. We go out for coffee, we sit, sikhulume,
You
and
gossip.
we fight like a couple. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, that's actually quite interesting that
Yeah.
that your mother that is not up for.
No,
There's no discussion about it.
not
Would
an
you
option.
would you want to then go to a home at some point?
Potentially.
Potentially,
Yeah,
yeah.
potentially. If I had
Yeah.
there's Nice retirement homes now, where you
Yeah.
can get the services that you need. But all of this depends on health, quite
Eish,
frankly,
yeah,
which is not
health.
necessarily always our choice. But hold that thought, back with you after the break. Welcome back to Still Uncaptured. Our next conversation now is about a disease that has taken over South Africa in a really bad way. You don't read about it much. People don't talk about it much because there's a lot of shame attached to that, as with diseases that have to do with behavior. But we've got to talk about gambling. Gambling is a big problem. I happened to be at Carnival City the other day, which is a big casino in the East Rand.
Mm.
And here's a couple of things that I realized. Gambling has no respect for race.
Yeah,
People of all colors
yeah.
and shades, creeds, sizes. There were black people, there were Afrikaners, there were Indian people, there were colored people. It's an equal opportunity affliction.
However, what's very interesting, and you made a point when we were busy plotting this, and the fact that a lot of these people, yes, they might be coming from all kinds of walks of life, right? But they tend to be above the age of 50. Is it? It
Yes.
tends people that physically, and so we're talking about the physical people that go to casinos, and I
Yes.
suppose that has got absolutely everything to do with the fact that people over 50 are not so tech savvy, right? Because
Right.
we need to talk about the other
I
gambling
was going to say, it doesn't
that
mean the young people are not
insidious.
gambling.
No, in fact, they might be gambling a whole lot more
Right.
than people. So online gambling, oh my goodness,
You can
like the
gamble on
horror
your
stories,
phone, basically.
like you're playing PlayStation or an
Yes,
Xbox.
exactly.
It doesn't feel real,
But
right?
you're using real money.
So that's very interesting because I remember, I used to do this thing, which is called driving Norway slowly. So I'll just leave the house and just drive with no particular destination in mind.
Right.
But then lately, I realized that because I write for a living, uh, there is there are very few places that are better minds for stories than casinos. So I live about sort of 10-15 minutes away from Emperor's Palace because also I live in the East Rand. I live in Boxburg. And I drive there and I get there at like midnight or I'll get there at 11:30. I don't have a,
Do
by
you
the way,
gamble?
I don't know how to gamble.
Okay.
I remember the last time I gambled in a casino was 1995, and a friend insisted, gave me 50 rand and said, "No, you have to gamble." And I was like, "I don't gamble." And I was like, "No, gamble." And I remember I played, and I won 600 bucks. And after I won 600 bucks, I was like, I've got 600 bucks that I didn't have when I got here.
Right.
And I sat down and I was like, "Let me just have a beer." And of course, he came and he took out the 600 bucks. He took from me and he played with and he lost it, right? So I don't gamble. But I sit there and I see exactly what you're talking about. Like you look at these people and there is a tragedy. There is a tragedy about the people that are in casinos, guys. They really are. You were just joking now as we were coming in because one of the technicians here, at the studio is talking about the fact that he's in a mall, he doesn't get to see the sun.
Right.
Because that's important.
Right.
An
In
important part of
casinos,
gambling.
you don't get a sense of time.
There's no time.
Right.
So there's
And
no
then there's
day,
like
there's no night.
and then there's the
Yeah.
constant noise of the
Yes.
machines. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. So it'll encourage you. I did gamble when I was at the casino
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I was there,
I don't
so
trust
might as
myself.
well.
Yeah.
And you realize it just keeps getting you as if you're like you're almost there. You're almost
Yeah.
there. So you win like 15 rand. It makes this sound is like, oh, another casino winner. You'd be like, it's 50 rand for God's sakes, But here's the thing:
Yeah.
there was an old lady who was there who asked me for money for a taxi because she had gambled. Ndende kaofela, her entire sasa had gone towards gambling, and I felt really bad for her.
Yeah.
That you're this old, which means that she knew that she was running out of money, right? But that compulsion where it's like I can
Yeah.
feel it, it's almost there.
Yes, there is that. What do you call that? Where people have got these beliefs, for instance, that a machine that someone has been sitting on for a long time, it's now warm.
Right.
Of course, it's so completely irrational.
Or
It's illogical,
some
right?
people will go to the same machine
Yes.
only. And they
Yes.
only gamble on that particular machine because they believe that that's their lucky machine.
And it doesn't work.
Meanwhile, it's about probabilities, right?
Yeah.
And if you are looking at statistics, if gambling worked, you would be rich. Let's put it
Yes.
that way.
Yeah.
If you were so good at gambling,
Yeah.
you would be rich. But the
Yeah.
point is, chances are, because people who are good gamblers, not good gamblers, let me say, who are compulsive gamblers, like to believe that they know the system. Oh,
Yeah.
no, this is about that time. You
And
know,
of course, it's bullshit, right? It's
nonsense.
like none of it works
Right.
because ultimately, and I think the figure is something ridiculous, like 2% of people actually ever win.
Right.
The house always wins.
Right.
That's why that place is there. I mean, think about what Emperor's Palace is, because before then it was Caesar's Palace. But this is also the site where it makes you think about our government. This is the site of where the future of this country was debated and
Yeah.
argued. The World Trade Center is underneath where Emperor's Palace is. And yet we've got a government that happily just lets this gambling go on, knowing
But they
full
started
well.
it to begin with.
I know.
Gambling licenses was
Yeah.
one of the first, were one of the first to be given out.
Yes.
Post-democratic, what,
And the politicians have got their fingers in there.
they have their fingers completely in there and are making billions out of people's misery.
Misery, because that's what it is.
We were no, really,
Yeah.
we were sold out there, because a few politicians got to benefit, but those politicians get to contribute to the ruling party.
And so here's the thing about you and I. Let's have this conversation just briefly for like a minute. The fact that you and I are talking about this, right? And most of your traditional radio and television, gambling is an issue that no one touches.
Do you know why?
Of course, we know why. Tell
Because
us.
they sponsor everything.
They sponsor everything.
They are the biggest advertisers now.
Yeah.
Where we used to have the Rothman Cup,
Yeah.
it's now
Benson and Hedges.
Benson and Hedges.
Gunston 500.
Right.
So, and because we thought as a country, we decided these are vices. We should not be taking this money. Alcohol, advertising, cigarettes. What else? Also, do we not want to be advertised? Fast foods as well. Some
Right.
certain sports and whatever, you cannot have fast foods. And yet, happily, our football league, our professional football league, the PSL is funded and is bankrolled
Yeah.
by gambling money.
I would even venture to say, what isn't sponsored by gambling these days? Because
Yeah.
they're giving big money,
Of course,
which means they're making big money. And this is both online gambling and traditional gambling.
a friend of ours, and I hope by the time that this particular episode airs, a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, I've known him for now 39 years. When you and I used to do Uncaptured, not Still Uncaptured, Uncaptured, at KFM, I remember he called us because we had a family meeting about gambling, and people just came out and they shared their stories, how gambling has basically messed up their lives and so on. But I am happy to report that as a result of the conversation that we had, this man turned his life around as a result of this conversation, because he listened to us and he says, Mapoloba, I listened to you and I was in a taxi. I'm an exec at work, working for one of the financial institutions, and I am in a taxi and I'm going to be walking something like 2-3 kilometers because I don't even have money for an Uber.
Right.
And I'm thinking, what is going on? But he actually changed. Like the change that has happened in his life has been amazing because he walked away. And this is why I'm going to look in this camera and say, guys, I mean, even if we just affect one person just to stop gambling, we will feel better about our role. Yeah.
You told me two harrowing stories. One, talk about the porn stores around gambling establishments.
24-hour pawn shops. You can go at 20 past 3 in the morning and go and pawn your car. Go, just drive on the R21 where there's Emperor's Palace and look at the number of pawn shops that are around. Highest concentration of pawn shops of anywhere within the casino, because that's how bad it is. I was approached by a woman who followed me around. Followed me around for like the whole thing was about 2 hours in one of my nocturnal visits to that place, to Emperor's Palace, saying to me, 20,000, just give me 20,000 rand. 20,000 rand for an X5. An X5. I actually was like, no, I need to see this car. I followed her to the garage and she says, here it is. I promise you that X5 is at least, I mean, maybe 3 years old. 20,000 rand. She said, I've got the papers. She was willing. And I know that if I had engaged her, and I said to her, withdrew money, and I said, I've only got 10,000 rand, she was going to take 10,000 rand for an X5.
Because she felt like she's just about to
She was
win.
just like, I'm just on the verge. I can feel it. I couldn't even ask her, man. But also, here's another thing about gamblers, is that they lie. Because I asked her, I was like, so how much have you lost? No, I haven't really lost all that much. Maybe 3,000. I'm like, there's no way this woman
Right.
has lost 3,000 rand. It's
Right.
probably likely 30,000 rand,
Yeah.
which is why she's now wanting 20,000 rand to continue gambling.
You know,
It's
I
sad.
just thought about it. Like, we should have had numbers for people who need help,
We need help.
because that's what they tell you all the time,
Look,
in these gambling establishments.
The beautiful thing about a podcast is that it can be edited. We can
Yes.
just put in that number.
Yeah.
So we'll have that. Yeah, we'll have it. But yeah, no, gambling is bad news. I mean, Tebucho, my wife, used to work with someone who was married to a gambling addict. I mean, she would just come back home, no television, no microwave,
Right.
nothing. Like,
Yeah.
people will sell things. People will sell their cars. I mean, people will sell people.
If they
You know, we
could.
talk about human trafficking.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are just paying off gambling debts,
Right.
and they will just go and snatch a child
Yeah.
because they have to pay off a gambling debt.
We'd
to some-
love
yeah.
to hear what you have to say, your experiences with gambling. Are you a gambler who's gotten into trouble before? Do you know somebody? Are you living with somebody who is a compulsive gambler? Please engage with us on our social media. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Still Uncaptured. We just talked about gambling. Now we're going to talk about losing your mind. Have you, Ndumiso, ever lost your mind, or have you experienced somebody close to you losing their minds?
Of course, I have. And particularly in the social media era, sometimes you can see someone is posting things there and you are getting concerned because they probably either oversharing or that is completely off. You can tell when
Yeah.
someone's on a tangent that
Yeah.
that only they are on, because that's what losing your mind is, right?
Yeah.
Because we need to talk about that as well. It's like, when we say people are losing their minds, what
What
do
do we mean?
What do we mean?
Well, I'll tell you,
It's
because
it's Kanye. It's Kanye right now. Okay, we're talking about this, right? It's the middle of February. Is Kanye losing it right now?
hell yeah. I think he's already lost his mind. I mean, the
Uh,
guy's tweeting about being a Nazi. I was watching him at the Grammys. Come with that poor soul that he calls his wife. And I'm just thinking, "Ke ngwana mang?" And I'm thinking, like, when it falls apart, and I'm not saying if, when his marriage falls apart, this woman is going to have a hell of a stories to tell us. And I'm always wondering, like, why are you letting him parade you naked when he's fully clothed?
Yeah.
That always surprises me. It's just like, when a wow sapuli, you want your wife to be constantly like naked half the time, but you've got your clothes on. It kind of doesn't make sense. He's definitely, I think, has lost his mind. I personally feel like over the last 5 years, there's been times when I lost my mind, where I felt completely depressed. Where sometimes it was coming out publicly in the sense of social media. When you write something and maybe in the morning you were like, for share.
I know.
Overshare.
And can also just say that you and I are conscious enough to actually even understand that we live in an era of cancel culture, and so political correctness is very important. The words that you use, and so we just want to be able to say that this is a conversation amongst friends. And so when we say people are losing their minds, no, we're not going to phrase it as, oh yeah, no, mental health, and so we're just going to talk about it like we would if we were sitting and just
No,
having a
there
conversation.
were moments where I
People
lost
lose
it
their minds. You lose your
completely.
mind.
I was so
Yeah.
frustrated with not having enough of an income, not having any prospect of employment, so there'd be times when wah! It's like in the middle of the night and you're feeling frustrated and uyabhodla nje, or uyahlanza actually. You're vomiting. And then wake up in the morning and be like, okay, maybe get some SMSs of like, are you okay?
Because that's always a sign.
That's always the side. And I think your friends should ask you, Hori, like, is
Yes.
everything okay? So, and
Yeah.
at some point I just thought that, you know what? If I'm going to lose my mind, I don't think I want it to be public.
To be public.
Yes. Like,
Yeah.
zikoxe khomoto. Like, bring yourself to yourself and keep it a bit tidy.
There's a friend of mine, and this friend is someone again that I've known for many years, over 20 years, right? And in December sometime, he posted something on Facebook, and it was a long as post. Facebook, you can go to town. You can write a dissertation on Facebook, right? So he writes this thing. It's long, and nothing about this thing that this guy is writing is anywhere near the realms of normalcy. Like when someone is talking about things that he's talking about spirits, he sees things
Right.
that no one else is seeing.
Right.
Because that's always the first time,
Right.
which is weird for people like you and I, because you and I are the type of people who do as in our very normal way of life. This whole podcast, us on radio, we've always talked about things that people don't necessarily talk about, right? So we used to just being, on the edge of what is as people consider normal. I write satire. I mean, some of the things I've written that have been published, people read it, and sometimes you read it and you're like, hey, my point about this column is crazy, man. This column is great. But there are times where people really go off tangent. And so I had to call him. I had to say, Mfowethu, can I make time?
Right.
Can I talk to you?
Which is what a good friend should
Yeah,
do.
I was like, and he was like, no. And as soon as I called him, he's like, no, I know why you're calling me. You're calling me about that particular post. And then he explained himself the way that he did. I still think that the post was cray-cray, but he stood by it. But I got a bit of context to what he was
What he
saying.
was talking
Because,
about.
once someone says to you, but also remember, Ndumi, so you and I don't harbor the same views on things like spirituality and religion.
Right.
Because can we be honest as well? A lot of these things manifest, and they seem to affect people who tend to be very religious. Religious and spiritual people say things that are a bit where you're like,
Hey, when people start seeing things, right? Things that we can see. And I acknowledge that it may be that they are seeing something that nobody else can. Right?
Yes,
Like for them, that's their reality.
That's their
it's almost like
reality, yeah.
hallucinating and I do also leave room to say that there are things in this universe that cannot be obvious to the naked eye.
Of course.
That we do not see, but that it doesn't mean that they're not happening. Now, let's just cross over
that's crazy. That's crazy. Someone was like, see, that's crazy talk. That's crazy talk.
Call me crazy then.
So moving.
But speaking of someone a little crazier than even me, Onaija Robinson. I don't know when this podcast is going to come out in terms of date, all right? But
please tell the listeners.
I think we all know Onaija Andrew Robinson, who's this African American woman. I don't know how I feel about her being African American. I kind of felt like, how Onaija?
How Onaija?
Hi, man.
Yes, Limaza.
Onaija Robinson is this African American woman, 30-something, 33, I believe, who fell in love with a Pakistani man online,
Yeah.
and then continued to go meet this guy. They were supposed to get married. But now this, apparently she misrepresented herself, both with her pictures. She was catfishing him, both
Yeah.
with her pictures and about who she said she was and how old she was. Because this guy was only 19 years old. Onaija gets
I was
there.
about to say, why you keep on saying this guy, this boy,
This boy.
this boy.
I don't know. He just thought, like, maybe he's got a ticket to America. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And things did not turn out as Onaija wanted in Pakistan, but she became a local celebrity
Yes.
because this boy and his parents moved out. She remained in that apartment. His parents were like,
This
no,
is
no, senor,
Elijah.
please don't do that to me. And she started acting in a really bizarre manner. But the Pakistanis, bless them, they embraced her. And as much as they were laughing at her,
Yes.
nobody was laughing with her. Because then she was kind of cray-cray.
Yes.
You know what? She was exhibiting, symptoms of being a bit crazy. So now as we speak, she's in Dubai. She finally left Pakistan. She didn't want to leave. She said she wants to stay there.
She wasn't she demanding $100,000?
$100,000.
Dollars.
Yes.
Yes.
To fix up this place.
Yes.
Give me $100,000 and I'll fix up the place. So now I'm watching this and I'm thinking, where's this child's parents? Children, whoever. I'm thinking this woman has family somewhere.
Yeah.
And her son did come out to say that she's not well, that she's got severe
how old is she, by the
bipolar
way?
disorder. I believe 33.
30. Okay.
Yeah, she's like early 30s, basically.
Yeah.
So, sometimes when you lose it, you do it publicly or you do it in such a way that it can get the world's attention. So she was there, very famous on TikTok. I've never seen her posting as herself. I've seen posts about her. And for example, when she had a news press conference.
A press conference, yes.
There were so many cameras. Oh my goodness, there were so many cameras. And she didn't want to leave, but eventually she did, and she's in Dubai now.
So here's the thing. If you were starting to see signs with Mapoloba, engathi,
something's off.
Yeah, engathi intamba ayisathinti kahle kuparafini,
Paraffin, right.
How would you know that that's what's happening with me at that
I'd have to
particular-
call your wife.
Yeah.
No, I'd have to call your wife. Like, I'm worried. I'd call
Yeah.
your wife. I'd call Maswazi. Do you understand? I'd call other people that we have as mutual friends to say, like, is he okay?
Is he all right?
Is he all right? Like, if first of all, I'd reach out to you
Of course.
to say, Nganwam, you sound crazy. Like, can you just desist? Or if you like, do you want me to, like, those private visits that we were talking about? How would you deal with me?
Oh, I mean, I obviously would have to call people exactly the same thing. I'd have to call Ati and be like, is she okay?
Right.
I'd have to call your brother and be like, are you sure? Are you sure she's okay?
When was the last time anybody checked on her?
Checked on her, because sometimes people joke about this. People say, oh, somebody please take his phone away from him. But sometimes, like, literally, someone's gonna go and like snatch the phone from you
away from you
and take it away from you, because sometimes a lot of the how do you call it, erratic behavior as well comes as a result of consumption of substances. Sometimes people post and they're just drunk.
Right.
I mean, sometimes they're just drunk, or sometimes they really they got a new dealer in the array. I dabble, in the green stuff. So I said it, and so sometimes I'll post something, and then in the morning I'm like, no, man, delete this. So, because there's also that, right?
Right. No, completely. We'll be back after this little break. We're back with you on Still Uncaptured to round off this conversation. All right. So when my mother bought a house in Spraiview, there were a lot of trees that were deliberately planted to help it, to make it suburban and whatnot, right now, most of those trees are gone. And we had at least 3, 4 in our yard, but My mother's chopped them off. Why? Because ditlatsa fail. Why do you think there's such an aversion with black people and izihlahla?
You know what it is, and I'm not trying to be an intellectual here. I think that black people alienation from the land is fundamental. When you dispossess people of land, remember, we were so dependent on trees before Western medicine came. We were everything dependent on trees.
We even knew their names.
We knew their names. We knew why it was important. Umuzi wesiZulu had an animal, a plant called isigqiki somkhovu.
Which is what?
It's a form of cactus.
Okay.
I feel so stupid now that I actually didn't look it up, but I can look it up. So you plant it by the gate, wherever your entrance is. It was supposed to ward off evil spirits and so on and so forth. You know, part of the mythology that we exist under. But also just black people. Also, I think they seem to attach being rural and being backward with living in a forest of sorts. Because I remember, one of our neighbors when Tebogo and I lived in Springs, and selling a house, and I was away. I was in Cape Town, and she calls me and she says, "Oh, I think we're getting black neighbors." And I said, "Wow, how would you know? Have you seen them?" She's like, "No, I haven't seen them." So how do you know? She's like, "No, no, no. I know that it's month end is coming. These people are moving in. But how do I know?" People came into the yard. There was just sawing, cutting trees in the yard, cutting trees in the yard. And she just knew. And of course, she was right. When the people moved in, they were black. We cut trees. Like if you go, it's like a concrete thing, and then it's like it's summer. People are in the township, and they've now got these savannah dry umbrellas and trying to get shade, when you could just be surrounded by trees. And of course, trees. What does photosynthesis produce? Oxygen and coolness and so on. And so I come from a village where my mother lives. My folks moved when I was 25. Valley of 1,000 Hills. My house is a forest, and everyone else's house is a forest. People where I come from, there are just trees and vegetation. I showed you a picture just now.
Very lush.
Lush. It's lush. It's green. And why is it so important to have trees?
Well, because they're a habitat for other animals that we need in our lives, right? Like birds. Like it's nice to have you sitting there in your garden and birds are coming in and out and all that stuff. Some people also say, yes, but they'll harbor snakes.
Yes.
That's what they're supposed to do.
That's what they're supposed to do.
We're not saying like, listen, I have a problem with snakes as well. I'm just
You
saying.
do?
I do. No, I've got a thing.
This is the first time I know this about you.
Are you serious?
That you don't like snakes?
I don't like snakes. Do you like snakes?
I like snakes.
Yeah.
I handle snakes. When I see a snake, I rescue snakes. When I see a snake, I pick it up. I taught this to my brother, Umxolisi, Father Reverend Umxolisi Ngobo. He know frogs. I like frogs. I handle them. Because I also understand, unlike a lot of people, that guys, 99% of snakes are totally harmless. They truly are.
Yeah, I read this somewhere on Cheppies. I still don't believe it.
No, they truly are. They're just harmless creatures. I suppose they're just creepy because they just slither on the ground and they look.
It's the unexpectedness of snakes.
One of the things that I think you and I connected us so much when we first met is that we also discovered, because you were on a bit of a journey to discover new young black writing, and that's how you came across my book, and that's how we became friends. But one of the books that you and I have in common that we loved so much was the book by, he's now, I think, either he might be a professor or a doctor, at least, Dr. Jacob Dlamini. I think he was at Princeton at some point.
Princeton or Yale?
Yale. Oh, it could be Yale. It could be Yale, right? Yeah. Jacob Dlamini, Native Nostalgia.
Right.
And he writes a beautiful story, beautiful in the sense that the thinking was so beautiful, where he talks about how successive administrations came and they would deliver owls and cats and to deal with rodents, which are a serious public health hazard.
That's why we call them vermin,
Vermin.
because they
yeah,
bring disease.
disease. What did we do with the trees and the cats and the owls?
I've got an answer.
Yes,
For 500, we killed them.
killed them.
We killed the owls.
Killed the, what has an owl ever? Okay, you are 53 years old now. Ever heard of someone who was killed by an owl?
No.
Okay.
But
Ever?
our mythology
Yes.
has a huge issue around owls because they're
Yes.
supposed to be evil, or
Evil.
people can use them to send evil spells.
Yes.
Which is such a ridiculous thing to believe. But Bamnyama, come on.
Cats. What have cats done to anyone?
Especially black ones.
What have cats done to? Do you know of anyone who's ever been killed by a cat?
No, of course not.
What's even more interesting is the fact that you are something like 40 times more likely to choke on a chicken bone. How many people do you know that have died of choking on a chicken?
Not that I know
40
of.
times more likely to be killed by choking on a chicken bone than being bitten by a snake.
Right.
Because even the black mamba, which is the most poisonous, the most venomous snake that we have in Southern Africa, I think there's another one that's more, but it's right up there, the black mamba. But even a black mamba, if a black mamba bites you now, you still have 2 hours to get to a hospital and you'll be fine.
Yes, but
Do you know
I'd
what I
rather it
mean?
not bite me.
Hey?
Can I just say I'd rather it not bite me?
But that's not what snakes are about. Do you know that snake?
Apparently, they don't actually like people.
They don't like people.
So they don't tend to come in.
They're trying to run away from you
Right.
most of the time.
Right.
Snakes are really just trying to. So when they come into our homesteads, it's because they're cold-blooded, right?
Right.
So
They
basically,
need sun.
they need warmth.
Yes.
They're just trying to get warmth. So if you
Yes.
see a snake, then man, come on. Not lento look
I
touch
cannot believe
J's fluid and throw J's fluid on a snake. Why?
In all this time, I never knew that you loved snakes.
I love snakes.
We've
I've
never had this
I've-
conversation.
I've kept snakes as pets as a young person.
Oh, hell no.
I did. I used to have a snake that I like, a pet snake.
Like
That-
a python or something.
No, not a python. A python is like it was like a garden, it's like one of those.
Like, oh
green-
yes, like a garden
Yeah,
snake.
garden
Like a corn snake or something like that.
I also,
Okay.
I think I also had there was one, one of the spitting cobras,
Mhm.
a wrinkle. I kept a wrinkle as well. Dangerous snake, but I kept it.
Okay, Steve Irwin. On that note, I don't know how I feel about this. Where were we going with this conversation? Let's plant more trees.
Plant more trees.
Let's
guys.
plant more trees.
If
Yeah?
you can, whatever, go buy seedlings. Go to wherever you can, a nursery, whatever. A lot of trees also are just being given away. There's so
Sure.
many places you can go.
Right.
Botanical garden. Someone was telling me, I think Simpiwe Ngwane, a friend of mine who just recently finished his PhD on Zulu history, was telling me that in Peter Marisburg, the botanical gardens, they like practically giving away trees. And I'm pretty certain here in Gauteng, in Cape Town, just buy trees, guys, and just plant them. Just have like trees around your house.
And certainly teach it to our children. On
Thank
that note, we're out of here. We'll see you again next time.